everyone, my name's Katie. Welcome to my channel Chords Records. As you can see from the title of this video, I picked up some amazing recent finds at a local record fair which I want to take you through, and also just a few new albums which have come out which are super interesting, which I'll share with you at the end of this video. So in Australia, in Sydney, in a suburb called Newtown, Newtown's a very hip suburb. It's getting gentrified. It's used to be kind of very student type suburb, almost grunge in its kind of aesthetic, and it was fantastic. I lived there for a while when I was younger. And of course, the first one there, one of the best ones I got of the day, was this 1982 Japanese repress of Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols. What an incredible album by a band that only ever released one studio album before their demise. As you all know, they didn't last very long, a couple of years really in their formation. And this Japanese album, it came out in 1977, but the Japanese repress on Victor, the Victor Company of Japan, is just a beautiful pressing. Didn't come with an obi strip, but the vinyl is almost mint. Absolutely beautiful. So that's my first pickup. The second one, I was so happy to get this. I'm starting to collect Tim Hardin, and this was a 1972. It was the last album that Tim Hardin did for Columbia. By this stage, he'd fallen well into sort of drug addiction. He'd moved to the UK to try and get clean at a methadone clinic or something. And he released this album, giving it one kind of red hot go, one last go, and it failed miserably, and Columbia kind of let him go from the label. But it's actually really beautiful. Unlike other Tim Hardin albums, unfortunately, he doesn't do any of the songwriting. Part of his absolute beauty is songwriting. He was a 60s folk singer of the greatest kind of brilliance, and this album was largely covers, but it's still beautiful because his voice is just like an angel. I really love this album. This album is called Painted Head on Columbia, and this was a first press from the US. Very happy to have picked this up. Now, the next one, don't judge me, but we all have a bit of a guilty pleasure with collecting vinyl. Mine is 80s soundtracks. Nothing makes me happier than putting on an 80s soundtrack. And I picked up this 1980 Australian original of the classic John Travolta film Urban Cowboy, full of a whole bunch of neo-country artists and tracks, including Dan Fogelberg, Charlie Daniels Band, The Devil Went Down to Georgia, Eagles, Lion Eyes, Johnny Lee, Bonnie Raitt, Linda Ronstadt, Kenny Rogers, Boss Skaggs, Bob Seger, Joe Walsh. It is just chocker full of that kind of urban country pop, or neo country. So it's a double album. Very happy to pick this up, still with its hype sticker on it, $14.99, which in today's money is probably about right, $55 or $60. So that was my guilty pleasure purchase. Right. The next one is the classic Travelling Wilburys. Now, I don't have any Travelling Wilburys. It was hit and miss for me, but I just thought, that I might get it because the albums may get sort of harder and harder to come by. At the moment, you can still get them readily available. 1988, Australian original. This was in beautiful condition, so I decided to get it. And of course, we have Bob Dylan, George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, Roy Orbison, and Tom Petty. Tom Petty, beautiful. I'm not super familiar with the album. Of course, I grew up when they came out. I was very familiar with them when they came out. Never listened to the album back to back. Have you? I'd really like to know what your thoughts are and how you think it stands the test of time, this album. I put it on and it was hit and miss for me, and it was hit and miss depending on who was taking the lead. I wasn't a super fan of the Bob Dylan tracks, but I love the obviously the Tom Petty tracks, for example. Let me know what your thoughts are, and if I should get any other albums. Really like to know. Thanks. Right. This one was another one, not unlike the Tim Hardin. You can see a bit of a theme emerging here of my tastes. It was the Loudon Wainwright Epic Flop t-shirt. Tim, when this came out in 1976, I picked this up. This is an Arista US original. When this came out, he did a radio interview in Australia, funnily enough, and he years later, and he said he was so embarrassed by this album, and he wanted almost to disown it. This album was a absolute change in direction for him. He obviously Loudon Wainwright, an incredible storyteller, in the folk tradition, and quite acoustic in his previous work. He went full band, electric band on this album. This album has stood the test of time, in my opinion. I put this on and I thought, this works. You know, it's not as bad as he thought at the time. He has subsequently come out and gone and been a little bit more sort of a bit more kind to it and talked about it as one of his puppies. But there are some beautiful songs on here. There are a couple of acoustic numbers which are just classic Loudon Wainwright, and I will always pick up Loudon Wainwright. I just love him. So it's an odd album, but very happy to have it in really beautiful condition and a US first press. Okay. If you've been watching sort of recently, you'll know that I'm a huge Split Enz fan. You'll never not hear me talk about them. I just love them. A New Zealand band from the 70s and 80s that obviously the Tim and Neil Finn went on to form Crowded House, or Neil Finn went on to form Crowded House. But the origins were Tim Finn and his compatriots in Split Enz in the early 70s and mainly in the 70s and early 80s. I have every Split Enz album except for this last one, and I was so thrilled to pick it up. It was the final album, the 1975 Australian the Living Ends tour produced this live album. Sorry, the tour called Ends with a Bang produced this live album, The Living Ends, recorded in Sydney, Melbourne and Auckland. All the classic tracks. It's a beautifully recorded album. This is my Australian original. It came out in 1985. I was so happy to get it. It's really getting hard to find. Any Split Enz albums are starting to get up in price, and you can get them in sort of the op shops and garage sales, but if you go to record fairs, they're charging a fortune for it, as they did for this. You can probably get it a bit cheaper, in fact, on Discogs, but I was very happy to find it in at the record fair, and now I have completed my Split Enz collection, so very happy. But on Split Enz, I also couldn't resist picking up this USA promo, gold stamped promo of Dysrhythmia. I don't have too many Split Enz promos, so if I see them, that will probably be my next frontier, is collecting promos of them. So I picked up that. Oh, I was so excited by this next one. Joanie Mitchell, I'm a completist. She's probably up there in my top 3 artists of all time. And I picked up my second ever bootleg of her. Very happy. This was the amazing, how do you say it? The amazing Corny Phone Records company, Tackrell. I just call it Tackrell. This was a fun pickup, actually. This is, when you look it up, there are various colour versions of the printout. This one happens to be blue paper with pink ink, which it hasn't been included on Discogs yet, but I might add it, I'm not sure. but there are various versions. But the fun thing about this particular issue, as you know, with bootlegs, they often don't print on the label what the actual, more often than not, they don't print. So this one is Spin Dizzle with a few tracks on there. The tracks don't even line up with the amount of tracks on the vinyl. So you're kind of taking a punt that the record seller has listened to it, and it is in fact the bootleg he assured me he had. And sure enough, when I got home, it was Joanie Mitchell live in the UK in 1972. This bootleg is called Kept On by Her Own Devices. Very happy to have picked that up. Right, so now that's my record fair haul. I just want to go through a few new records, which are just fascinating for me. The first one is this Cunningham Bird album. Do you know this album? It is just beautiful. So Madison Cunningham, or Maddie Cunningham, and Andrew Bird, both incredible folk singers. Andrew Bird's been around a very long time. Maddie Cunningham is reasonably new on the scene in the last 5 years, and she in fact won the Best Folk Artist in the Grammys a couple of years ago. They have, note for note, song for song, reproduced the entire Buckingham Nicks album from 1972. And this came out late last year, and I was able to just recently pick it up. Super happy with this. It is beautiful. I have 2 copies of the Buckingham Nicks album. I've got the original, and I've got an Australian alternative cover original. I love that album so much, and this one does it justice. It is a beautiful album. If I had picked it up last year, it would have made it into my 2024 top albums. It's on this beautiful, what would you call that, purple colour. So highly recommend you having a listen to that. It's really worth it if you like that kind of genre of music. The next one is probably one you're not familiar with. This is this was an EP on a very plain card by Taurus, a queer artist who has recently been performing with Julian Baker from Boy Genius. And this was a collaboration that Torres and Fruit Bats did. It's an EP. It's slightly folk, slightly electronic, slightly bedroom pop. It's got a bit of everything on this beautiful album. It's one-sided, and the other sided is laser etched. So it was just a little small, kind of a small passion project, really, numbered to 500. I got number 41. All right, the final 2 albums. These last 2 albums I got from my son for Christmas. One of them I'd sort of requested, and one of them was an absolute surprise. So the one that I requested was this incredible album by Geordie Greep. Of course, Geordie Greep is an absolute genius multi-instrumentalist from, I think it's the Bristol scene in the UK. And this was his first solo album. This is hard to describe. It's absolutely stunning. You have to, and it's stunning because you can't describe it. It does not fit into a genre. It's lush, it's orchestral, it's free jazz, it's Queen-like, Jeff Buckley falsettos, frenetic jazz. It's just brilliant. And the other great thing about it are his lyrics. He is a really, really clever writer. I would highly recommend this to anyone who is interested in modern music. I think it's one of the greatest albums of the decade, if I'm honest. I absolutely love this album. The New Sound by Geordie Greep. Absolute must-have in a record collection. Double gatefold, as I showed, with a beautiful cover. So my son introduced me to this artist, and I asked for it for Christmas. And then the final one he also got. I I didn't know what to expect from him. And this is Moses Sumney, the album Grey. I didn't know it, and I'm obviously really late comer to it, because when I looked it up, it was one of the best albums of a couple of years ago on many, many lists. People I value and reviewers I value. It was in the top 10, definitely. It is the Moses Sumney is soulful. He's kind of, if you were to put him into a genre, it'd probably be soul. There's funk, there's slight jazz, but it is just beautiful. He's a beautiful singer, and it's beautiful music. This is a beautiful gatefold as well. Look at that. It's absolutely stunning. And I'll open it up the other way as well, so you can see the beautifully designed album cover. So that's my final album for this video. I hope you've enjoyed my vinyl finds, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
So that's card. Do you need a bag?
Well, the 69 is the drummer for this.
Oh wow!
Because
I had to celebrate you, baby. I had to say